Hey, it's Dave from Doing Things with Dave. And today is Friday, the 25th of April, and I want to share some of my experiences transiting the Panama Canal. So, if you've seen any of my videos, you probably are aware I took a 15-day repositioning cruise from Miami to Los Angeles through the Panama Canal. We also stopped at 6 different ports, and I've been making some videos about each of those days and those experiences. But today's video is all about what it was like to transit the Panama Canal. So if you're interested in the Panama Canal, why don't you go ahead and watch this video, and hopefully it'll provide some perspective and some insight about my experience, and maybe it's something that you're thinking about doing. And spoiler, I highly recommend a Panama Canal cruise. I recommend a full transit. I was on the Norwegian Joy. I'm a big fan of Norwegian, and I thought the Norwegian Joy was a great ship to do the transit. So let's get into the details. So this was day 4 of the cruise. We'd had 2 sea days, and then we were in Cartagena, Colombia the previous day. I've just made a video about my excursion in Cartagena, and I really enjoyed Cartagena. But this was a really kind of the highlight of the trip, going through the canal. So we left Cartagena in the early afternoon because we had to be at the entrance to the canal early enough to make sure we made our reservation window so we could get through the canal on time. Generally, about 40 to 50 ships go through the canal every day. So we had an early start time. And essentially, we had been briefed that we would go through the canal, start going through about 6:30 in the morning. So got up early. Now, luckily, I had a balcony cabin. I was room 12180. So I was on the port side, 12th deck, and just slightly forward of the front stairs. Almost, if you will, midships. But what was nice about it, I was directly over the district brew house. If you're familiar with the Breakaway Plus class of ships, the Joy and the Encore, as well as a few others. So it gave me an unobstructed view, if you will, to the right, and could easily see the canal area and going through the canal from my balcony. So first, we went under the first of 3 bridges. So there are 3 bridges that cross the canal. There is the Atlantic Bridge, and we're coming in from the Caribbean or Atlantic side. Then you have the Centennial, and then the last one is the Bridge of the Americas. The Centennial and Bridge of the Americas carry the Pan American Highway from Argentina all the way up to Alaska. So that's kind of cool, but we'll get to that later. So as we first went through underneath the Atlantic Bridge, sun was starting to rise, and it looked like it was going to be a beautiful day. So we started early, and a couple things about the ship and the way Norwegian set it up, and I know some of the other cruise lines that go through the Panama Canal do this. They opened up the bow, so on deck 8 we were able to get up kind of a Titanic-esque moment, if you will, being able to be at the very front of the ship. Up there, they had some tents. Underneath, they had coffee, they had pastries, they had some chairs, they had water, they had towels, so that they knew it was going to be a long day, and they were really doing a lot to make sure guests were comfortable. They also had sort of the same setup in the stern. So deck 8, the waterfront, which goes around 3/4 of the ship, they had chairs set up, they had coffee, they had some pastries again. So they were really being very accommodating to guests to see or lots of different areas. Also, deck 15 on the Joy is the observation lounge. Now, the Joy does a lot of cruises in Alaska. Matter of fact, it's now on its way to Alaska. But the observation lounge is a completely enclosed space that has really comfortable chairs, has a Starbucks, has a bar. They do snacks, and a great way to view things like the canal from an elevated position, but in comfort. You can also go up to deck 16, where the Garden Cafe is, which is forward, and be able to see out the front of the ship. Or go to deck 16 Spice H2O, which is in the rear or the stern of the ship, and get a high-level view looking to the back. What I did is I tried each of these spots. I walked around the ship after I had taken some video and pictures from my balcony to see which spot might be the best. They were all crowded, to no surprise. We had over 4,000 people on the ship, plus crew. So, everyone wants a good spot. Ultimately, where I spent the majority of my time through the locks, and the first set of locks, the Agua Clara locks, was on deck 7. Now, a little bit of why I went to deck 7. Deck 7 is the lifeboat deck. It has open space on either side of the ship. It does not go all the way around, but it's the closest to the waterline. And in the locks, we were almost parallel before we would raise up in each of the 3 sections. Now, a little bit on the locks. There are 2 sets of locks. There are the original locks that were opened in 1915. And then there are the new locks, which are much bigger, designed for larger ships, that started operation in 2016. Now, I know all this because on our ship, we had a guide who was a former pilot, basically the person who helps steer the ship and con the ship, control the ship, give directions from the Panama Canal Authority. He had done thousands of crossings, so he spent the entire day giving us updates, where we were, what we were doing, what to pay attention to, what to look for, history, facts, interesting tidbits. Phenomenal. I know a lot of the ships do it. Our guy was amazing. He was in his mid-70s. He told us the best stories from the moment he got on the ship about 6 a.m. until we docked in Panama on the Pacific side at the Pacific Coast Terminal at about midnight. And now he wasn't talking constantly. He would come on, talk for 15, 20 minutes, and then get off the microphone. But this is also the ship communication system. So he basically had taken over communication on the ship from the bridge, and it was great. So again, our first set of locks, the Agua Clara locks, we were a much bigger ship, so we had to go through the new locks. What's interesting is they are not 2 directions or 2 lanes at once, where the older locks do have that. And they also use a little bit less water, about 7% less compared to the older locks, based on just engineering marvel, updates, and technology. An interesting fact I also learned from our guide, the Panama Canal does not have any water pumps. Everything is, or electric water pumps, everything is via gravity, which is just fascinating. You think about this, the engineering feat to build these back in the early 20th century, and then in the 21st century, which is just phenomenal. So it was a really neat experience. Now, again, down on deck 7, I got really up close and personal to the lock system. And as we went through each of the 3 locks, you go up about 30 feet, a little less, about 85 feet in total. And you get to see it really close up. Also got to see things like the doors. They are giant pocket doors that slide in and out of the lock system. They're 30 feet wide. You can drive a car over them, which is just amazing. The old locks, they're not as big. They're a slightly different design. You can walk across them, and you'll see staff walking across them as you go through them, which is, I think, a pretty cool experience as well to watch. But going through the Agua Clara locks was a really cool experience. Then we cruised into Gatun Lake. Gatun Lake is the man-made lake that was a result of the damming up the river, the Charcoles, I think, river, which allows the canal to have water and allow ships to transit through it. Normally, when you go through Gatun Lake, you slowly cruise through it, and then you head towards Gamboa and the Gaillard or Corbera Cut. But in our case, we had to anchor. And the reason we had to anchor had to do with it's early April. It's the end of the dry season, combined with tide shifts at the Pacific coast side. So being able to get under the Bridge of the Americas, we had to actually delay our transit by a few hours so that we could get underneath the bridge safely, which was fine. So what we did is we cruised into the middle of Gatun Lake, we dropped anchor, and then we sat there for about 4 or 5 hours. And this was not a negative thing at all. It was incredibly relaxing. It became, if you will, a mini sea day. What normally happens on a cruise ship, if you've ever been on a cruise, is you either have a sea day, which is kind of, you take advantage of all the amenities on the ship, or you have a port day where you go in, you explore port, and you do, port things. Transiting the Panama Canal is kind of interesting because even though you're not getting off the ship, it feels like an excursion on a port day because there's so much to see and learn and experience, what you normally do when you go tour a new island, a new city, combined with a port or a sea day because we had so much free time in between the locks and sitting in Gatun Lake. It's kind of the best of both worlds. And again, this is full day 4 of our cruise. So we've already had a few sea days, we've already had a full port day, and we're all in that cruise mode. Everybody's kind of relaxed. And again, it's a 15-day cruise, so you've got plenty of time to think about and enjoy the cruise. So it's one of the best days I've ever had on a ship. So what I did over the couple of hours that we had to kind of relax is I went in the pool for a little while, I took a short nap, had some food, and then ended up sitting on deck 8 on the waterfront, which again is one of my favorite parts of the Norwegian ships. 3/4 of the way around the ship, it's got restaurants, bars, plenty of walking and seating areas. I ended up sitting at the outside bar of the Cavern Club. They have a bunch of nice covered seating area. So sat down, had a couple of beers, and just basically talked with a few people, talked with some of the staff, showed off some of my Gooder sunglasses. If you know, you know. I will post or link a video on my my love for Gooder sunglasses. But we sat there until about 1:32 p.m. Anchor came up, we slowly maneuvered our way, and we headed towards Gamboa and then the Gaillard Cut. Now, Gamboa is where, it's kind of like midpoint, if you will, in the canal. They do some excursions from there. There's Monkey Island and a few other things where you can go see monkeys and all sorts of wildlife, which we did see a lot of wildlife a little bit later. It's also where the main dredging area is and machine shops for either side of the canal. They obviously have to do constant maintenance on the canal. Each of the locks has a ton of maintenance facilities, but again, the canal is quite long and requires constant maintenance to keep upkeep, right? Because you have 40 to 50 ships going through every day. So again, I was talking about maintenance and making sure that the canal stays in operation is of critical importance. Now, we went to Gamboa, or cruised through Gamboa, or passed through Gamboa, saw all sorts of maintenance facilities and the cranes. Most importantly, the big crane. There's one crane that was built in Germany in the 30s, and there was a total of 4 of them. This may be the only one left still in the world. There may be one other one in Great Britain, but we got to see it, and it was massive. So after we passed Gamboa, we got into the Gaillard or Cabrera Cut. The name change was based on the canal being given back to Panama. It still seems to be known as the Gaillard Cut, though. That's what our guide called it. But this is the part of the canal that looks like a canal. It's about 8 miles long. It's quite narrow, and you feel like you're in this little tiny canal, which was kind of cool. As we moved through it, we saw a lot of interesting things. So certainly some wildlife, saw a couple of different crocodiles, and it was kind of cool. We're sitting there just chatting, and all of a sudden it's like, that might be a crocodile. We zoom in, and sure enough, it is. We also saw an infamous prison, a prison that Manuel Noriega, back the dictator in the late 80s from Panama, that's where he spent some time. We saw what I thought was probably the highlight of the cut itself, and that was going through the Continental Divide. So this is from the Andes all the way up to the Rockies, and this is what connects North and South America. So as we went through the Continental Divide, it was really cool. The Andes to the Rockies, connecting North and South America. We then went under the second bridge, this time the Centennial Bridge, and then cruised our way towards the last set of locks, the Cocoli locks on the left side. So we veered right. On the left was the original locks, Pedro San Miguel, and then Miraflores. Pedro Miguel is just a single lock, and then Miraflores is a traditional 3 setup lock, just like on the Atlantic side. I think the elevation is a little different, which is why we had, they have the 2 lock system there. One note about elevation, both Atlantic or Caribbean and Pacific are at the same elevation, they're sea level. The reason you have to go up or go down has to do with getting through the Gatun Lake and the cut itself. Now, as we pulled into the Cocoli locks, It was nearing dusk, which was great because we got to see the locks operate from daytime to dusk to nighttime. So you got to see a little bit different. And again, I spent most of my time on deck 7. Really enjoyed being close up to the locks. And then after dinner, I went up to deck 8 on the waterfront as we were waiting to finally get released to go under the Bridge of the Americas and then head into dock at the Pacific Coast Terminal in Panama City. Happened to see a giant crocodile. Now keep in mind, deck 8 is about 50 feet above the waterline. So this guy was massive, and it was really cool to see yet another crocodile on this cruise. So we then went underneath the Bridge of the Americas. Again, the Pan American Highway runs on this. It runs both on this and the Centennial Bridge. And then we docked. Now, a couple of things I just want to highlight about why and things to think about for a Panama Canal cruise, the transit day. So if you are doing this, there's a couple things that were, I think, important. There's a lot of places to watch. You know, like I said, we went up to the bow, the stern. We went to the upper decks, whether it's the observation lounge, the garden cafe, the stern area. Deck 7, closest to the waterline, got to see things up close and personal. But do and find the best areas for you. Walk around, explore, see what you like the best. Second, sunscreen and a hat. You're going to be out in the sun for hours. Make sure you don't forget about the fact you are in Central America and the sun is hot and you can get a sunburn really fast, even in the morning. Third, make sure your devices are charged, whether it's a phone, a GoPro, another camera, etc. You don't want to be in a situation where your phone all of a sudden dies. 4, the ship's going to probably have some water, coffee, etc. So bring a refillable mug like I did. It worked really well. It makes life really easy. And then don't forget to relax. It's a long day. Even without having a delay, you're going to still have 10, 12 hours doing this. So take a break, take a nap, eat, go swim in the pool, go relax for a little while. Do the things that, because it's kind of the port day, sea day, do all sorts of things experience. Don't forget to relax. Don't forget the fact that you are on vacation on a cruise ship. I really enjoyed this, and it's something unique. I'm glad I did it. It really was amazing. In any case, I know this video has been kind of long, kind of how I do these things. I ramble a little and I tell a little bit of my stories. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're considering a Panama Canal cruise. I loved it. I loved it being on the Norwegian Joy. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like cruising, especially my perspective, maybe subscribe to my channel. And in any case, I hope your day's great, and I'll see you on the sea.